All right. Thank you for joining us for another episode of season 2 of the Nebraska Gentleman. Today we have a guest from Springfield, Massachusetts. He's an entrepreneur, and I'm thankful to be in touch with him still today. We met at a couple of events while I was a student and worked at Springfield College, a Black women's event called How to Wear Your Crown, and also Constructing Kings, which was an event for young Black men. And he's somebody I'm very thankful to know. He has his own business with Upscale Socks and Underwood Photography. And his name is Mr. Lenny Underwood. How are we doing today?
I'm great. It's great to be with you today, Nadu, and I appreciate your offer and the opportunity to be with you and your viewers.
I appreciate you for being here. So my first question, let's dive right into it. I want to know more about what got you into your two business ventures. What was it that inspired you? And explain more to people what both are.
Definitely. So growing up, my mom was definitely a shutterbug. She was always at family outings, church events, community events, taking photos with her camera, back then in the late 80s and 90s. In early 2000s, it was, film cameras, but she was so consistent with her photo albums. Every occasion she was there taking photos. So I think from a distance, I was taking on many of those characteristics of having a love and passion for photography. So in high school, I got more involved with yearbook and would take photos for the annual yearbook, as well as other outings in the community. And then in college, I was also part of the yearbook. One year I was editor-in-chief. And I would say by accident, I started the business because people want to start hiring me for photography. And so I didn't necessarily expect to go down that road because my mother and grandmother would tell me to get a real job. That's just a hobby. That's not something you're going to make money off of. You didn't go to college for that. That's not a viable source of income or way to support yourself. So I continued on in that mindset until, things started continue to grow and get busy. And it wasn't until November 2004, I was asked to perform my first wedding. And I was really like, whoa, I don't even have packages here. And I don't consider myself a professional photographer. I just have the passion for it. But obviously they had seen my work and admired what I was doing in the community and knew I had the ability to perform. And that was a really tough week for me as well. My paternal grandmother had passed away. I had a flood in my basement. Someone broke in my car, actually. I was having a breakfast meeting with someone. Wow. And someone threw a brick through my car and stole my photography equipment. So that Black Friday, my mom took me to Best Buy and she bought me a new camera. And so everything happened like instantly. And I feel like sometimes you have to be broken in order to be blessed. And I was certainly, that was the beginning of Underwood Photography right then. Even though I had been doing small things prior to, it was never on that level. I got more serious about it and more confident. Even still with my family saying, don't go too far into that, just concentrate on your education. So I did eventually graduate undergrad and grad school and did delve slightly into higher ed and working in higher ed and public schools. But most of my adult life, I've been an entrepreneur. So that's Underwood Photography for the most part. There's several avenues, as you can imagine, over the last almost 16 years that I've been, in that business. But that's I would say the genesis of Underwood Photography. And then with Upscale Socks, it's also interesting how that got started. It was in summer 2014, I had a dream one night that I owned a sock line. So I woke up the next morning, told a good friend of mine that, you know this, Nadu, we were on Wheel of Fortune together. So I told him the next day we're on about it and we're going to go in business together. But he eventually relocated to North Carolina. And so it didn't necessarily work out for us to go in business together. And I think we have different styles, I guess, when it comes to, business. And for that entire year from 2014 to 2015, I would ponder the idea of getting started. Never worked in retail before, knew nothing about the industry of, merchandising and marketing, that type of business. Never, even had that idea. So it wasn't until 2015 I started getting serious about it more. I would ask business experts, those that had done business overseas. No one really wanted to help. No one wanted to share any insight. Or they would say, oh, give me a call, or, we would have a conversation, it would go nowhere. So that was quite frustrating. And it wasn't until I went to an Accent Expert event that August, where I met someone with the Small Business Administration, and she shared with me an organization in Holyoke, and I pursued a program for 10 weeks for newer existing businesses that gave me confidence to pursue the idea even further. Even though it didn't necessarily focus on my sock line, it just gave me confidence to meet someone like you and say, hey, what kind of socks do you like wearing with your outfits when you're going to the office or to a wedding? And it held me accountable to really focus on my business on a daily basis or weekly basis, because we had homework and assignments that we had to fulfill and be consistent with. So that was 2015. It went until about a couple days before Thanksgiving. And then in 2016 is when I started doing more work with my logo and branding and finding a manufacturer that I was comfortable with. I researched probably 30 across the world and got so much insight and a lot of skewed information, as you can imagine. But it wasn't until December 2016 when I officially launched, right a week before Christmas, which was perfect timing with a launch party and inviting all my constituents and friends and family to give me feedback on the socks and purchase them for the holidays. And it was a great time. So as with photography, a lot has happened since then. I'm still learning and growing and having fun.
And leading back to the photography side, you definitely had quite the journey. You weren't lying. And just to clarify, 2004 is when your first shoot was at a wedding. And then Upscale Socks, or your venture in that, began 10 years later in 2014. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah. So I have been doing things unofficially, with photography. It was nothing where I was getting paid for that I can remember, and it wasn't until the wedding that really catapulted me into seeing this as a viable career, a source of income. My eyes were so enlightened when I said, wow, this could be real. and it's been amazing. Unfortunately, this season is different, but doing, hiring my mother to accompany me at a wedding where she's running the photo booth, or the, doing instant prints at a prom. So it's been great to develop it even further.
Absolutely. And you touched on this, my next question being obstacles you went through to get into both. And you mentioned broken, and like your car got broken into, and photography equipment isn't cheap. And It sounds like you, in my opinion, have expressed like a lot of gratitude about your mother being there and continuing to be there for you. Are there any other obstacles with that? And you mentioned some with the dream of, having your own sock line too. Are there any other obstacles that you have had to deal with that others in your situation of being an entrepreneur can maybe learn about how to adapt through them? The pandemic being one of them, How have you adjusted? Let's go there. How have you adjusted with the pandemic with both of your businesses?
Yeah, so once the Commonwealth of Massachusetts started seeing the rise of cases in maybe the second week in March, that Wednesday I received 8 calls and emails and text messages canceling events. So as you can imagine, when you are planning a wedding and have proms and graduations and sweet 16s and formal events, scholarship dinners, you name it, coming up, you're like, okay, this is getting pretty serious, and this is the beginning of many more to come. And so daily I was getting those messages. So I had to come to grips with that mentally and say, well, I have to figure out what to do in the meantime. And I must say that my customers have reached out to me. Some of them would just want to support my business with still having their senior and high school's photos taken in their cap and gown, or
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah, or doing a drive-by 80th birthday party, birthday gathering, and I'm capturing that moment with video, which I don't do a whole lot of video and photography. And, you know, of course, with Upscale Socks as well, I've been really humbled by the amount of purchases online. It just keeps happening. Every day, I'm waking up to, you know, see my email with some new orders, and it's so humbling. And once, like I said earlier, I'm humble, thankful and humbled, and I'm having fun with it all to see it all develop. And they're all original designs, so I have a lot of latitude to, you know, play around with things when it comes to the direction I like to go in. But yeah, you know, you definitely have to pivot in situations like this. We have no control over how people spend and what they spend on. As you can imagine, most people are waiting till 2021 to have their events, be it a class reunion. Even if you graduated 20 years ago, you're waiting until 2021 to have your formal event. There's several brides and grooms that are waiting until next spring and summer to have their wedding. They may elope this year, but they're gonna have their wedding celebration next year. And I understand that, but somehow, or by the grace of God, I've been sustained through it all. And yeah, and it's given me time to do other things. I've been watering my grass every day, and it's looking nice and green. I planted some seeds. I'm gonna plant some flowers, I think, you know, next week, because I have a flower bed that hasn't seen any flowers in the last 4 years because of my schedule. And things around the house that I've neglected or haven't had the time to do, that's been on my to-do list as well, that has been tackled. So it definitely has been challenging, but you have to turn a misery into, I guess you could say, a ministry for other people to hear your testimony or your example, but also for you to not get despondent or depressed over it, and just know that you're not in this situation alone. There's millions of others that are faced with unemployment or threat of unemployment or loss of revenue, and it could be worse. I mean, there's so many affirmations that I tell myself daily, and, you know, to stay positive and feed myself with good vibes.
Absolutely, and I think I like that acknowledgement that right now there are people that aren't okay, but what can help to not sit with that is thinking of what position I'm in compared to people that have it worse, as well as having things to look forward to. Thankfully for you, you have built such great relationships that it sounds like 2021, when things start to really come back, could be a great year to look forward to, and I'm happy to hear that. And, you know, he mentioned too, people getting his socks. We are going to mention later too. I'm going to have a link at the bottom, but I've gotten 5 from him, and I'm wearing one now with cookies. And then these are just some of the symbols on them. This is just 3 of many options he has on his site, but we'll talk about that more at the end of our episode.
Yeah, thank you for your support, for sure.
Of course. And Lenny, thank you for the, you know, just the advice you've been giving people during this time that are also struggling because of the pandemic. So I also want to hear from you. Are there any experiences, Lenny, you know, we're reminded by, you know, the killings of people that look like you and I repeatedly. It almost seems like, whether it's yearly or even recently weekly and daily. Out of curiosity, what are things that you have gone through that made you aware that it happened because I'm a black male in America?
I would say I was reflecting on this week actually. When I was in high school and my freshman year of college, I was a page worker, which is someone who works for a library. You put away books according to the Dewey Decimal System. And one of the librarians, a couple of them were really racist. I know they were. They would always make comments in the break room to me. And I didn't really have a response. I was always taken aback by it, and not saying I was very passive, but I was like, I don't want to lose my job. I don't really know how to really address this. I didn't even share with I don't think my mom, because if she heard, she would come in and, cause a revolution. So I just myself, and that's one instance. And even I think in high school, at my high school, I had a great high school experience, but my father unfortunately passed away when I was in my junior year, and he had lung cancer. And so it was in the midst of preparing for the AP exam for one class in English. And I understand, there's a lot to prepare for that in scheduling, but she was not even trying to be sympathetic and really give me that time to grieve. So I buried my father on that Friday and then back to school on that Monday. And there wasn't, having someone that understood and that can understand your situation as a 16-year-old, I think is critical. And not saying it was totally based on race, but being having empathy, I think is important too, in instances like that. And so those are a couple that come to mind. And then even when it comes to business, I will say this, and hopefully I won't get in trouble if anyone views this, but I'll say it anyway, that I will say I'm thankful for the business community, but some of my white counterparts only hired me for their corporate events, but never for their family events. They're nice off the surface, but beyond that, I don't know if they're really down for supporting my business. They'll take my card and there's rarely any action. And not saying they owe me anything and not saying they don't already have someone in mind for that, but I kind of feel like sometimes they're just meeting a quota based on, okay, I work for this corporate organization, institute, and we have to have X amount of minorities or women to work as a vendor. So, but nonetheless, I press on, and I can't complain that I haven't gotten good support from the minority community.
I do think that's an important thing to touch on too, whether that's today or another time. But that's a great point, making that there are businesses that do that, and that's real. And it really can at times make you question: is it me that they're wanting to work with, or are they just, like you said, meeting that quota? So that's another thing I think it's important for our white friends, counterparts, colleagues, white people in general, to be aware of too, that that's not really something that they have to worry about or deal with. So thank you as well for sharing that. And along with the treatment that you were given when your father passed in high school, I'm sorry. I mean, and the other reason too you had an expectation is because that was an adult figure, and that shapes, our relationships with them. It shapes how we not only think of adults but also ourselves, and how that relationship should be between a teen and an adult. So I'm sorry that flip around from the funeral to class 3 days later happened.
Yeah, thank you.
But
By God's grace, we are all resilient and able to have that support from the community, the religious community, the business community, our family, our friends, that make sure that we're okay and that we're getting the proper support that we need, even if it does not come from those that we would expect it to.
Absolutely. So, Lenny, are there any takeaways that you would want, whether those people you just mentioned and that are some of your, clientele, or whether it's friends or just white people in general, that you would like them to know or take away from your experiences, or just to be more aware of moving forward in today's society?
Yeah, I would say I'm glad we're having the conversations more because it's critical that we come to the table. It's been going on for far too long, as you know, and for whatever reason, it being more visible on national news and on social media, people are really disheartened by it. But we hear these cases weekly, it seems. So it's not a surprise to us. It's horrific nonetheless. But I guess our white counterparts are believing it now because they can see it with their own eyes. Whereas, oh, that's fragmented information. They were doing this. They weren't complying. Whatever it is to justify. But I think more so than not, they're seeing how if they were in this situation, they would not have been, they would not have lost their life. So I think it's a great start. I just don't know where we can go from here. I was sharing with a friend who was having a podcast this week that I think one thing we could do, and I'm not sure how possible it is, but to have an anti-racism class nationally in every school so that it can be discussed from where it stems from, because as we often say that it's something that's a learned behavior. So if they're learning it in kindergarten or at 3 from their parents, then how can we flip that and make them more understanding, even if they do live in a predominantly white community and they may have these implicit biases about other people of color or others that may not look like them. Because as you know, the world is changing. And so we still have a long way to go from others that are, when I was in high school, transgender wasn't really a thing, or wasn't as prevalent. So when it comes to that, not saying we need to veer from the racism conversation, but that could also be something that needs to be discussed, because I think one of those that was who lost her life was a transgender individual. What's that? Okay. Yeah. So I think that would certainly help, because I'm not sure what's happening in places that I've never been to, be it Wisconsin, Montana, South Dakota, that are predominantly white areas. And I do not want to walk down those streets. I would, be fearful at times of not knowing what to exactly expect. And not to say I'm very ignorant, but I've seen enough to know that anything could happen.
And I think you bring up a great point and idea. It's something I thought of recently too, of how amazing it would be if these classes on just, I took a class called Counseling Diverse Populations with a professor named Dr. Allison McCain, and I really credit her for teaching me many things, and or at least opening up my eyes or furthering my knowledge on these topics, especially my male privilege. And I get your point. You're not saying that we're pushing race aside. You're just saying that this class could entail a lot of things, because the more we know, you do better when you know better, you do better.
Yes.
And I think what if it starts younger, even better, because people like you and me would feel like, just imagine kids going through this right now in school.
Right.
Imagine how much better they would feel knowing that when they become adults, that their white counterparts, they're not gonna have to worry about being around them and something very ignorant being said, because they were taught in high school that these are things and ways I can interact with people of color, especially Black men and women who face this, like you said, every day on the news.
Right.
So I just like you implementing or sharing with me that idea, because I totally would agree, and I think most people would.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, is there anything else, Lenny, that you would like people listening, whether they are predominantly white, to learn, or people that look like you and I, just to take away? And because you went, if you don't mind sharing, you went Tuesday to something that can help. So do you mind sharing that piece?
Yeah, totally. So this past Tuesday, in the city I live in, Springfield, there was a prayer vigil rally at City Hall. It was sponsored by a couple pastors in Springfield. It was very ecumenical with Hindu, Muslim, Catholic, Christian, clergy from the area. And as you can imagine, very diverse crowd, those that had signs and shirts, and this really peaceful and beautiful with prayers primarily, and testimonials. It was only an hour long, but very impactful, I felt. The police chief was there as well as the mayor. He had sent out a letter to the community sharing that the event was happening, and the word got out, and it was well attended. Then the next day, there was a huge protest, Black Lives Matter walk from a high school to the police station in Springfield, and that went on for hours and hours and hours because they were hoping to get something out of the police. I didn't attend that, but that was attended, as you can imagine, by a very diverse crowd. Thousands attended. I'm not sure the numbers, but I passed by when they were at the high school, and it was a huge show of support. And then today there's another rally in Springfield, downtown Springfield. So I'm glad that these conversations are being had and that people are taking the time out to be intentional to show their support and being an ally, because we need support, and I think people are really, I can definitely say for myself, people have been sharing and purchasing online my socks that I've never met and don't look like me, and that's a show that they want us to succeed, and they're doing their part, even though it may to some seem small, but I appreciate it. And some are just sincere and really mean it. So and may not even know what to say and how to react to a situation like this. And they don't want to say something and be wrong and then they're attacked, by someone on social media. We all see that happening.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Ooh, let me retract this, and I really meant this." I think that's that. And then I've been listening to several online podcasts and conversations locally with the NAACP and the Urban League. Yesterday, I was listening to the president, Mark Morial, with the town hall that they were having leading up to the funeral for George Floyd yesterday afternoon. And so those are a few that come to mind. There's so much. Hopefully that will continue to happen.
Absolutely. Like you're saying, the dialogue and things that we can all continue to learn about our experiences, and not being okay just settling for another, somebody in law enforcement getting away with the killing of innocent black men and women. So,
yes,
Lenny, we've had a great conversation. What I'd like to do now is please share with the people a link on where they can buy these great socks, which, by the way, they smell still amazing the day I got them earlier this week.
Oh, nice.
Hopefully, maybe he'll share the cologne with us too. If not, I respect it. I understand. But Lenny, where can people reach out to you and buy your products? Also, reach out to you for photography sessions, and then just learn more about you.
Yeah. So websites for Upscale Socks is upscalesocks.com. I'm also on Facebook. You can like the page. You can follow us on Instagram. Also, you can follow us on TikTok. So I'll be doing more TikTok videos to spread out to those that are on that platform as well. For Underwood Photography, it's Underwood Photo, no S, photo.net. And you can also find me on Facebook under my name, Leonard W. Underwood, as well as LinkedIn.
Is there any chance that we'll be able to have a link to that episode that you were on for Wheel of Fortune too?
It was on YouTube, but
okay.
I think due to copyright issues, it had been taken down. I didn't post it. Some game show enthusiasts did post it, but you can find clips. If you Google my name, you can actually find it. There's some articles on, a few outlets where it's found the results and all that jazz. So I have a personal copy I can always share with you.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you again, Lenny, for taking the time to join us today. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you of not just this topic, but continuing to grow this friendship. And I thank you for sharing and being so open for me and all our listeners.
Yes, it was an absolute pleasure. I'm glad to be a part of it, and all we can do is go up from here and keep our eyes focused and prayerful.
Amen. And I will make sure to share his link. This is his great card that he gave me with the package, as well as one where when I first met him, and it has all his information that I'll be able to share with all of you after today. Again, thank you, Lenny. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.